the fetus is in the third trimester. Is that correct? Any of you guys neonatologists? Well, I mean, look, this is true. If the baby, regardless of its location, can feel pain in some sort of understandable way, then what you do to it matters to it. And what you do to it matters to it makes it a moral object, you know? And that runs crosswise of a lot of liberal intellectuals because they tend to believe the baby is the woman's body, you know? And I can't believe that given concern for animals, you know? So I think that's a serious issue, and I think there will eventually come out more scientific knowledge on these sorts of things, which will, I don't know what it'll ramify in, because I never believed that Roe versus Wade would happen, you know? But it could well change all that, or it could create a huge culture war, right? Which already exists. And I'm not just talking about, you know, the people in redneck country, you know? But there are really thoughtful people who worry about it, and there are increasing numbers of doctors that won't do third trimester abortions. And I've talked to guys who have. They've done it once, and never again, you know? There's stuff we don't know a lot. And have any of you read John Fertosic? He's a neurologist. He did a book on pain. He also did a book on the making of a neurologist. And he had a patient when he was a resident that had that, didn't have half the brain. I forget what you call it. Do you guys know? Yes. And of course, according to Orthodox theory, that's not a conscious entity, you know? Or if it's conscious, it's going to respond to simply stimuluses in a reflexive kind of way. And let's go. He is not a romantic at all. You know, he's an intelligent guy who can make, like Oliver Sacks, who can make neurology really interesting. And he said that the hospital advised the parents not to come and see the kid, you know, because they would be doing something like bonding with a doll, where there really was nothing going on inside. He said, in his own interactions with the baby, he swore there was something. You know, if he'd ease her posture or play with her or something, she would smile. His colleague said, "You're full of crap." You know? I'm trying to remember. It's been 10 years. The last line of the chapter is, and this gives you some sense of how strong his belief was, "I never set foot in a pediatric neurology ward again." And this guy, you know, he's cutting-edge researcher, surgeon, and all that. So, I mean, I'm amazed he actually put it into language, because he's going to be subject to ridicule, you know? But still, I mean, there's something profound there. We don't know everything. God knows we don't know everything. Because, I mean, look, the fact that it was ubiquitous that babies didn't feel pain. You know? I'm not trying to duck your question. I'm genuinely trying to give it a run. It's good questions. Others? Yes?
For pain research and others, it's possible to write an exception in the protocol that you're not going to treat pain because treating it will affect the very outcome that you're trying to measure. Can you comment on this, please?
For one thing, there's so... She said that in the IACUC system, you can refuse to consider pain when it affects the result of what you're looking at, or when you're studying pain, obviously. You'd be surprised. I mean, I deal with this. I've been on the IACUC at CSU for 30 years. I founded it. Many cases, a person who says that has not looked at every possible pain control modality. Because there are lots of modalities that do affect certain relevant variables, while others do not. You know, obviously opiates are going to do one sort of thing, local blocks are going to do another, et cetera, et cetera. So at least half of what we've seen claimed to be unmodulatable have not turned out to be so, which is why I required a pain person on the committee, you know? But there will inevitably come situations where it really is the case, you see? So what do? You know? First of all, tell me if what you're thinking of must be done in a conscious animal.
I'm talking about neuropathic pain, so this is chronic.
Okay. Could that be done in a non-conscious animal?
You can test pain.
You don't feel pain when you're unconscious? Or no, I'm sorry, you don't have pain activity when you're unconscious? Now I'm sounding like a positivist.
Don't get pain.
Well, then how can we talk about general anesthetics with low analgesic property? You know what that means? What that means, pentabarb is a classic example. You do a surgery on the pentabarb, the animal or the person isn't aware, but the body is. It goes through all the physiology of acute pain, sweating, panting, accelerated heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, look, I think you're absolutely right. There are going to be situations where, in the end, you can't do any of the things I'm saying, and you've got to do it. So the question is, are you doing it for the minimal amount of time, for the minimal amount of animals, and does it really need to be done in that form? You know? And we have had, very rarely at CSU, which is a very liberal campus, in 82 we were called the best in America by nature, but still, there are protocols that are over the line. We can't countenance their being done. In one case, it was done until some of the veterinarians watched it, and this was introducing sepsis in a rat by nicking the cecum and then letting it go systemic. And the people on the committee said, you know, this is beyond the threshold of humanity, you know? And it was very interesting. We have a president who's a PhD scientist, a biomedical scientist, and I said to him, you know, Tony, you may be pissed off, but we curtailed and banned this protocol. And he said, what took you so long? You know? Part of the answer to your question is going to be cultural. Will people accept sufficient exigency of protocols to the benefit of humans? That's the cost-benefit thing. Fair enough? If you get one of those that you're having trouble with, send it to me and see if we can find a more humane alternative. Russell and Birch talk a lot about that, by the way. Did you read that? The 3 R's, guys. It's a very fat book. Everybody knows only the 3 R's. But there's a lot on pain. And there's a lot from the Society for Pain Research from the early 80s on not making it unacceptable to people. Yes, sir?
You seem to have fairly well established that animals feel pain, and by virtue of that contention, it seems as though you place value on animals' life. I was wondering if you would agree, or if you would have any problems with the statement of placing higher value on human life than animal life.
No. I just don't know by what. I would go so far as to say that some animals have higher value than some humans. That's a terrible thing to say, I mean, because everybody says, whoa, human dignity. Here I'm in a medical school, the best medical school in the world. I defy you to explain to me what human dignity means. It's just pious bullshit. I have a student, she's a French professor of surgery at Lyon, and she took bioethics masters in Europe, and there it's got the Catholic Church has a stranglehold on bioethics, and so if it doesn't deal with human dignity, it is not a legitimate object of investigation. They wouldn't let her work on animals, on animal issues. So, I mean, look, ask ordinary people. You know that the box, that business. It's an old philosophical conundrum that ethics teachers use. If God came down and said, "Listen, there's a little button. If you push that button, a mandarin in China dies a perfectly natural death, untraceable to you. You inherit his wealth. Would you do it?" I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you if you would do it or not, because none of us will answer honestly anyway. But, I mean, I do ask my students who are liberal-minded college kids a version of that. Your dog versus that mandarin. I saved my dog. Well, how about, well, I actually have a master's thesis from a student who argued, and she's Catholic and she's religious, but she said from an ethical point of view, we should be doing our biomedical research on serial killers, child abusers, child molesters, et cetera, et cetera. And at first people recoil, but then you start thinking about it, you know what I mean? And if you don't buy the argument, which I don't, and I got in trouble here at Hopkins by arguing that about 15 years ago, I don't think everybody who is a child molester or a child abuser is automatically sick. You know? I think that's bullshit that goes back to the managers, that everybody's sick, which is full employment for you guys, you know? There are bad people. Now, you can be circular and say, well, if they're that bad, then they're sick, i.e. something isn't normal. But, you know, the concept of sickness is not so clear. Believe me, I've worked on this for 25 years.
I'm going to stop this.
No!
You have a book signing. We're going to get kicked out of the room.
Who's going to kick me out of this room? You guys agree with him?